My name is Ray Adams. I'm the composer of the piece tonight. To my right is the esteemed Reverend Cynthia Bourgeot, who compiled the libretto and did an amazingly beautiful job on it. And we're just going to chat a little bit about the piece. From a compositional standpoint, as a composer writing a choral work, you're basically stuck until you get the words. And last June, I think Cynthia was expecting that some year we would do this project, and last June I just looked at her and said, now. And I went up to Eagle Island, Maine. She put it together, and well, she'll tell you about that part. Once I had the text, then it started to come together. A passion is a fairly traditional form for a composer to write in. Arguably one of the best choral works ever written, the Bach St. Matthew Passion. He also wrote a St. John Passion. Penderecki, I think, wrote a St. Luke Passion. There have been, it's like writing a requiem or some other kind of mass. It is a standard form. This piece, however, is not a standard passion. And I'll let Cynthia take off on her bit here.
Okay, yeah. Well, it was really wonderful and a bit of synchronicity all along when Ray asked me to collaborate on writing this passion. And I had thought it would be a few years down the pike. But there were already some things that were kind of percolating that made it a really important piece of timing to do it now. And a lot of that has to do with the person to whom tonight's performance is dedicated, Father Theophane Boyd, whose relatives will be in attendance tonight, and I think are just getting seated now. We'll introduce you later. But I'm an Episcopal priest by trade, and so I've known my share of the passions. I've sung both of the Bach passions and also what generally goes on during Holy Week each year in any church. You stand up and you dramatically present these passions. But it had always struck me that the Passion, being a real kind of particular period piece, emphasizes just the blood and gore and pain and suffering without putting it in any kind of message that contexts it. And it's very much one strain of piety to sort of identify with Jesus through feeling guilty or emotional about the suffering. But it always seemed that didn't cut to the heart of the real message of Jesus' own teaching. So about a year ago last spring, I was out at St. Benedict's Monastery already thinking about, I'd like to do a passion that was a little bit more closely related to interweaving the meaning of this story. And on the particular day I was out there, Theophane was celebrating Mass. It was right after Easter, and right after Easter, the readings for the day are in a section of the Gospel of John known as the Farewell Discourses. And Theophane, who had just been diagnosed with terminal cancer, got up there and read the Gospel from John 14 that begins, "My children, a little while, and you will see me no longer." And there wasn't a dry eye in the house except for Theophane's. For him, it was all a day's work. But something in me twigged right there, and I thought, the farewell discourses actually give the meaning. They're the time when the Gospel of John, when Jesus hunkers with his disciples, tells them the meaning of what's going on and gives them the new commandment. "Behold, I love you give you a new commandment. Love one another as I have loved you." So I wanted to create a passion text that carried this feeling of love one another as I have loved you and the redemptive aspects of this passage through. And so when Ray came to me to ask me to do this, I said, sure, I'll give it a try. And it did literally come in 5 days. And it was one of the most exciting 5 days in my life, where I just sort of went back to the Bible and heard the text. And a couple times I literally got woken up in the middle of the night with promptings. But anyway, what you'll find is that this passion is in 5 movements. The first movement is called From the Farewell Discourses. And in each of these movements, you'll find it's based on a couple of core gospel teachings. And usually, but not always, the choir has them. So in the first movement, you'll hear the choir sing, "Behold, I give you a new commandment, love one another as I have loved you." The second movement is the classic Gethsemane story where most Passion narratives begin, where Jesus is in the garden. And he's wrestling and he's struggling and he says, "Father, if it be your will, let this cup pass from me, but not my will, but yours be done." But I interwove with that the text that he quotes somewhere later in the Gospel of John, "Unless a grain of wheat fall into the ground and die, it remains a single grain." So that you begin to get the idea that what's coming up is really, in Jesus' mind, a kind of passage, a sacramental passage. In the third movement, we're before Pilate. It's the territory that Mel Gibson has mined so thoroughly in the Passion that has been making major headlines. And you'll hear that there's quite a bit of violence and Sturm und Drang, as there is in all of them. But we've added in here as a kind of thematic anchor point the teaching from the Beatitudes. "Blessed are you when they curse you and revile you and say all manner of evil against you," in order to try and make the idea that this was all planned, this is all part of it. And then the fourth movement, which is on the cross, I took mostly from the Gospel of Luke, where there are some beautiful stories, beautiful, beautiful configurations, particularly the two thieves on the cross, who are crucified on either side of Jesus, and one recognizes him and one doesn't. And you'll see that one dramatically staged in the work tonight. And so what's left? Usually a Passion ends there with the crucifixion and the burial, but not this Passion. This Passion does come to an end with a very beautiful little poem in that section, which Ray will tell you a little bit more about. But I had thought the story doesn't end with the death. The story ends with something else, and so I added on a section called Remembrance. And this was one of the places where I literally got woken up in the middle of the night because something said, "Mary Magdalene, Mary Magdalene, Mary Magdalene, Song of Songs." And so you'll see Mary Magdalene come on and sing a beautiful lament taken from the Song of Songs of human love in its destitution.
It's the prettiest thing I've ever written.
It is. It really is. And you watch her come through and taking this ancient text, which is 4,000 years old, sing her way to the triumph that love is stronger than death. And then it's almost as if that wakes up the choir and they remember the teachings that Jesus has taught them. "Behold, I give you a new commandment, to love one another." And so it ends moving steadily towards the proclamation, "I am the resurrection and the life." So Ray, tell us a little bit about the music.